Hello, my name is Becky Frank, and I'm making this recording for Excelsior classes. Today, I want to tell you a story of the amazing moment in American history. I want to tell you the story of Betsy Dowdy's Ride. It's easy when we study the American Revolution to focus on what was going on in Massachusetts, but there were lots of things going on in Virginia as well. The royal governor of Virginia, Lord Dunmore, had seized the gunpowder that the House of Burgesses had allocated for the Virginia militia to use. He did so on April the 20th, 1775, which was the day after the battles of Lexington and Concord, and he had become concerned that the Virginia militia would actually turn against him and decided that he wanted the gunpowder in his possession rather than theirs. As you can imagine, this caused quite an uproar among the colonists of Virginia, and it led to Dunmore declaring martial law in the colony of Virginia. He also offered freedom to any slaves who would join him in maintaining the peace, and he left the governor's palace in Williamsburg and took refuge on a ship in the Chesapeake Bay, where he planned to retake his state, or his colony, excuse me. Now, this is where Williamsburg is located on this peninsula in the Chesapeake area. The first place that Dunmore decides to attack is the Battle of Hampton. He plans a land invasion, but the colonial militia has some pretty good marksmen, and they're able to keep Dunmore and his men on his ship. They're unable to plan a land invasion for Hampton because of the skill of the militia. So he will move on to Norfolk, where he was much more successful. And from there, he will go on to Great Bridge. Great Bridge was a bridge. It wasn't that great. It was a very small bridge, actually. But it bridged the line between North Carolina and Virginia. The North Carolina-Virginia border is approximately right about here. And as he had gone along, the governor's men had pillaged the plantations in the area, taken the supplies that they needed to continue their fight, had either confiscated or slaughtered the livestock and horses, and still offering freedom to any slaves that want to join them in the fight. He planned to move into North Carolina, where he could continue to gather resources that he needed. He was especially looking forward to the use of the ponies that were on the Outer Banks. And this is where Betsy Dowdy enters our story. Now, the Outer Banks is a group of barrier islands that form the North Carolina coast. They were extremely isolated during the American Revolution period. It was referred to as the graveyard of the Atlantic because so many ships would wreck off the coast. Joe Dowdy, Betsy's father, was a wrecker. He would salvage the goods from the shipwrecked ships and use them, sell what he could, use what he needed. Wreckers were also the first lifeguards. They would also help the people that had been left by the shipwrecks. There were large herds of bankers' ponies, horses that had washed ashore from various shipwrecks, that had taken over the Outer Banks. And in addition to being a wrecker, Joe Dowdy herded about 100 of these horses that he bred and sold and tamed. So Betsy Dowdy overheard a conversation between her father and a neighbor, Mr. Sammy Jarvis, that the British were indeed in Great Bridge and that they were planning an invasion of North Carolina through the Outer Banks and had their eye on the bankers' ponies. There were militia from North Carolina that were headed to back up the other patriots that were there, but they didn't feel that they were enough men, and they were really concerned that Lord Dunmore would be successful in his invasion. There was some talk that if only word could get to General Skinner and the Perquimans militia could join them, then they might have enough men to beat back the British. And Sammy Jarvis talked about maybe, tomorrow he'd wander over to the mainland and try to find General Skinner and let him know that he was needed in Great Bridge. Well, that wasn't good enough for Betsy. It was dark. It was nighttime. But she got her horse, Bess, and left a note for her parents, and she is going to go inform General Skinner herself of his need in Great Bridge. They live here in the Currituck section of the Outer Banks, which meant that Betsy and her horse Bess had to swim across the Currituck Sound. It was about a mile long where they swam across, and y'all, it's December. So this is not warm water they're swimming across. Then she has to cross the Pasquotank River using Lamb's Ferry, and she wakes up Mr. Lamb to do so. The Perquimans River she gets to ford on a floating whiskey barrel bridge before she can make her way to General Skinner's home on the Yopium Creek in Perquimans County. This part of northeastern North Carolina is part of the Great Dismal Swamp, which was home to renegades and runaway slaves and wild animals like bear and bobcat. Again, it was a nighttime trip. It was December, so it was cold, and Betsy does make it to General Skinner's home on the morning of December the 7th, just as the dawn is breaking. She and her horse rest for just a few hours, and then they turn around and head right back home because she did not want her parents to worry too much. General Skinner, of course, gets the message from Miss Dowdy and gets his militia together, and 100 of them head up to Great Bridge just in time for the Battle of Great Bridge. So Betsy Dowdy arrives the morning of the 7th. They get up there on the 8th, and they discover that Lord Dunmore and his men are on one side of the river waiting, and that the Americans have taken a position on the other side waiting. On December 9th, Dunmore is done waiting, and so he starts sending his men across the bridge. The bridge is so narrow that only 6 of them abreast can march across the bridge, and the Patriots just wait until the British get so close that they cannot miss, and then they start shooting from behind the breastworks that they have established. The battle takes all of 25 minutes. It's probably one of the most one-sided victories in the American Revolution. The British have 102 casualties, killed or wounded. The Americans have 1 casualty. 1 man has a gunshot wound on his hand. Dunmore will flee. He will actually, by January 1st, flee all of Virginia. The Patriots will be successful in taking Norfolk. And when Governor flees in Virginia on January 1st, all royal government goes with him. And so Virginia actually gains their independence by the governor leaving 7 months before the Declaration of Independence is signed. They have to establish their own government because of the void left by no more royal governor being in the area. Betsy Dowdy's ride is often compared to the one that Paul Revere had made. There are lots of significant differences. First of all, Paul Revere was an adult man. His route had been planned. He had other people going with him. He went in April, springtime, and there were only 16 miles that he had to travel. Betsy Dowdy, a teenage girl, alone, no one knew she was going. She thankfully knew where she was going. She went 50 miles in December through frigid water, rough terrain like the Great Dismal Swamp. Both of them did important announcements that the British were planning an attack, but Betsy Dowdy's ride seems much more heroic in light of the circumstances of her ride. Other than the presence of the Perquimans militia at the Battle of Great Bridge, there is no historical evidence backing up the existence of Betsy Dowdy. And in 1775, there wouldn't be. Women, young girls were not listed on any census records. Paul Revere was well known in his own right, absent even the information of the ride he made on the 18th of April in 75. Actually, most people didn't even know about that until Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote the poem commemorating the ride. A 16-year-old girl of an ordinary family would not have had a place on the historical record. There was no Instagram or Facebook back then. You shouldn't take a selfie with General Skinner. Hey, I made it. The legend of Betsy Dowdy is very well known in northeastern North Carolina today, and there is little doubt among the residents there that she actually was the reason the Perquimans militia was able to turn the British back at the Battle of Great Bridge. This has been an amazing moment in American history. If you'd like to find out about more amazing moments in American history, check out my classes at excelsiorclasses.com. Thank you.